Manny Gomez, if you could please just stand by for us. I want to introduce Tony Shaffer. He is a former lieutenant colonel in the Army, and he is joining us now also by phone. Lieutenant Colonel, thank you for joining us. You've been monitoring this situation here in Paris, as we all have. What are your thoughts on what's happening?
Well, I agree with your other guests there who's talking. The first thing we have to do is start examining the layers of what's going on here. First off, the patterns, looking for similar patterns in our side of the pond. I mean, we have to be vigilant on this. And most importantly, we have to figure out who's involved, why they're involved, and try to go about answering the basic interrogatives of why this happened again. And I got to say, it doesn't look good for France by the fact that, we had Charlie Hebdo earlier this year, and now this attack, and this seems like even larger. So I'd like to probably speculate here a bit that whoever did, the people behind the Hebdo attack watched very carefully, watched the response of French security, and they've learned a lot. And this attack is even greater. It's larger, and they are learning rapidly. And the whole point here is to simply, as much as this is going to hurt ISIS, I believe it's ISIS. I'm speculating here, but I think it's going to hurt the terrorist organization behind it. By the fact, I think this is going to create a great deal of resolve behind the international community, to include us, to actually be more vigilant and more aggressive against those folks who are trying to use radical Islam as a method of insinuating violence on us.
Lieutenant Colonel, why do you say ISIS and not, for example, Al-Qaeda?
Okay, two things. I think this could be a joint op. Hebdo was actually a joint op. According to one of the feed, the intelligence folks I talked to, they told me that one of the ISIS terror feeds that they do monitor about 6 hours ago put up a picture of Paris burning. Now, we don't know if that's because of the attack or something that is related to the attack, but ISIS is very good at doing two things. First, using social media to basically build themselves up and use that to recruit. So no matter what happens here, they're going to use this event to recruit. We know that. Secondly, if it is them, we have to recognize that they have been masters they're very well financed, they are very well armed, and money can buy you a lot of access. So, this attack today, this was not a spur-of-the-moment thing. This was 3 different locations, possibly more. According to one of my sources, suicide bombers were involved. They attacked a stadium involving the president of France, and this was all done simultaneously. This tells me this was rehearsed. These targets were all essentially what we call cased, and in the end, this was executed within minutes of each. So this was no small thing.
Colonel, what about the still ongoing investigation of the plane that went down recently that took off from Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt? There was word that ISIS was involved in that attack. Could this be a series of attacks that now they're just stepping up in regards to how often they are making these types of statements?
Well, I think so. I mean, I said this on another network, that my judgment is that ISIS is becoming expeditionary. Because of the very things I just said about them being very well funded, very well organized. I think they're looking at ways that they can now get into the international community and start causing even more havoc. And let's remember, the other thing that's going on is the unchecked stream of refugees into Europe. According to the friends I've talked to, there's probably about between 15 to 20% of folks within that refugee stream, which may well be terrorists. So we just don't know at this point what all's going on behind the scenes. We do know already that whoever's behind this, the scope of this is immense. We're talking about dozens of folks already dead. We're talking about hostages being held at least one location. And the question then becomes, what more is coming? Let's remember, Charlie Hebdo actually was an operation executed over several days. There was, I think, a 3-day period where the events were all linked to the event itself. We could be well looking at something that goes on for a couple of days here. I don't know that for a fact, but that's something to be vigilant for as we start looking at what's going on.
And you talked about the Charlie Hebdo case. 17 people were killed over those 3 days, Lieutenant Colonel. Talk to us about the French security. We got into that a little bit with the prior guest, but your take on the way the French are looking at terrorism and protecting their country prior to today.
Well, the GSG are a very effective counterterrorism organization. They are up there with our Delta Force, with any other, with the Special Air Service. They are superior professionals. The problem is this: without good intelligence, you can't do anything. This is where the good old-fashioned espionage, what I call, basically the second old profession. We case officers, our job is to figure out a way to use human intelligence to penetrate the network. And this is what I think we've all been failing. We have been too dependent on intelligence. There's a great, I don't mean to diverge here for a second, but the new Bond movie talks about how they over-rely on drones. Well, that's the very problem with what we're doing right now. We have to penetrate the network. To defeat a terror network, you must penetrate that network. Simply using drones and other things to assassinate people will not defeat the network. It'll always grow back. So this is my big concern here. The French security services apparently did not penetrate the network and destroy the network sufficiently after the Charlie Hebdo attack, if it's a terror-related, which I do believe it is. I don't think any criminal organization would have the resources or intention to do an attack at this scale. So this may well be that network, which the French didn't go far enough to defeat, because obviously, today's attacks are horrific, they're expansive, and frankly, this is something that we have to be vigilant of, because if ISIS continues to expand, and I'm going on a limb here, I understand, I do believe ISIS had some role in this, that I think we have to be vigilant right here at home for a very similar type of set of attacks.
Speaking of drones, you talked about the use of drones. The United States used a drone, it's reported, in taking out Jihad John, and it's confirmed that they got him. The chances of this being a retaliation for that?
I don't believe so. Here's why. Today's attack was well orchestrated, well planned, and I'm not going to say it wouldn't be related. John's death may have been a trigger event, but with that said, this attack has been planned for months. You don't have people with this level of sophistication, this level of armament, this level of very specific targeting, just decide one morning we're all going to go do this. Let me tell you something. These people have been rehearsing. They have done casing of these sites. They knew exactly where they were going to go. They knew exactly what time of day to do it. That does not happen because one guy gets killed halfway across the planet. Now, with that said, it's very clear the Pentagon, General Joe Dunford just took over as chairman about a month ago. The Pentagon is now examining our strategy on ISIS, and they're actually, within the last 30 days, have taken on a more aggressive posture to go after ISIS. But with that said, I think it's necessary for the Pentagon to get more serious and look at its tactics. But with that said, I don't believe at this point that the Jihad John thing was the stimulus. It may have been the trigger, but it was not the stimulus. This attack has been in the planning for months.
Colonel, I'm curious, though, why these three areas to target? I mean, we do know that the president of France was at the stadium. We don't know whether or not if he was a target. But why the music hall and why the restaurant? Why these three specific locations?
Well, two reasons I know. First off, they're soft targets. These are not military targets. Therefore, there would be very little, if any, resistance. Clearly, that was the case. So part of the job of terrorists is to terrorize, and clearly this was a masterstroke of hitting soft targets. Secondly, I do believe that the attack against the stadium was symbolic and was meant to essentially be done at the time it was by the fact that the French president was there. And I think by the fact that it was so bold, and frankly, let's be honest here, if President Obama was at an event here in the United States where a terrorist event happened, we'd have to be looking at firing a bunch of people, because there's no way any terrorist attack should come anywhere within a mile of any senior leader. So this is, again, something the French security service are going to have to look at very hard, because, again, the fact that the president was in the stadium that was attacked, that to me is a symbolic target, and I think that whoever did this attack really meant to send a signal to the French government by the fact the French president was there at that event.
Colonel, it's Marcia Kramer. We know from prior intelligence that ISIS and Al-Qaeda have been telling their people that when they strike, they should strike at things like sporting events. They, in fact, in New York said maybe the Open tennis tournament, but they've said that sporting events and places where you have lots of people were a good place to attack because it spreads a lot of fear and terror. Do you think that was in their thinking when they attacked the soccer game?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, again, I think they learned from Charlie Hebdo kind of the weaknesses, how to go about doing some of that. And yes, I think there's no doubt at this point in time that their intention was to maximize, and we don't know the numbers yet, by the way. We are still kind of in the dark ages here of how many people have actually been killed today. But with that said, there's no doubt in my mind that this was a mass a mass casualty event for purposes of maximum number of people. And frankly, we don't know. I was on another interview a few minutes ago on CBSN, and I got the question, well, what do you think is going to happen to the hostages? Is that, will the GSG actually go in and rescue them or attempt to rescue, or are they going to negotiate? My judgment is there's no negotiating. I think whoever took those hostages have the purpose of maybe buying some time to get attention drawn to them, but I don't think anybody is going to be coming out of there alive if the terrorists have their way.
Senator Colonel, as we watch these pictures, it is absolutely maddening and frustrating that here we go again. These guys have done this again. Right. What should the voter, the citizen think? What should we expect our leaders to be doing when it comes to going after ISIS and, as they like to put it, elected officials, eradicating this threat? How do you see that playing out?
Well, it's really a three-level challenge. First, let me say this right up front. I'm not one of those who believes we should put U.S. boots on the ground to do that. I think this is clearly something that if we get in the middle of, will become the issue. Therefore, I think we have to first off figure out a way to work with local allies, such as the Kurds, such as the Turks, to figure out a way to go about essentially regaining a lost space. Terrorists are drawn to ungoverned space, so this is the danger of leaving Syria to kind of fester. That ungoverned space now is dominated by terrorists, by ISIS. Same in Libya. So this is the first thing we have to do, is work with our allies to basically bring back governance to those spaces. This is where the Russians are actually helping us right now. Secondly, we have to figure out the root cause of this. This is not the first time this happened. We had Al-Qaeda about 15 years ago. Now we have this. We have to look at the roots of radical Islam and what's driving that. We have not done well in this war on terror to figure out root causes. Think about this. We have beat terrorists every tactical battle. Every time we meet them on the battlefield, we win. Somehow they keep coming back. So let's go to the root cause. Third, we have to be more vigilant about what's happening with the refugee stream and who may come here. As much as we want to be great stewards of people who need help, we have to be careful not to jeopardize our own citizens by being nice to others. This is where we have to be a lot more vigilant, a lot more astute on how we go about trying to help those refugees find new homes and essentially make sure the terrorists don't come through that pipeline.
You know, we've heard from officials that there is no credible threat to anyone here in the United States, but I have to wonder, now that I've listened to you talk about how you believe this particular attack today in Paris has been you know, in the works for at least a few months, given the sophistication of it. I mean, behind the scenes, U.S. officials must be very concerned after this.
Oh, they are. And let me be honest here. Look, James Comey has said in testimony that he's chasing about 100 Americans, they believe either pre-radicalized, close to being radicalized Americans who are either close to or very much aligned with ISIS. So he has his hands full. If you've watched, there's been a smattering of prosecutions. And I admire FBI Director Comey. I think he's doing his best job he can. But they have to be right 100% of the time. That is the FBI. Terrorists only have to be right once. So this is where, again, the challenge comes. And this is where, again, we need to look very carefully at what happened in this attack. What was all involved? Who was all involved? What were the mechanisms for moving weapons around? What were the intentions and that sort of thing? Because obviously we live in a society and we enjoy the fact that we can go to soccer games and all these other things and enjoy our time out. But with that said, there are people out there meant to do us harm. And people like Comey, people like the Pentagon, you know, are all working 24/7 trying to make sure that no radicalized individuals are able to do an attack like this here on our soil.
I almost hear you saying we need to change the way we secure our stadiums and our restaurants. Are we looking to make the country an armed encampment? I mean, with airport-style security everywhere?
I think you misinterpreted what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we have to be a lot more aggressive on our intelligence collection. No, I think we do a good job of screening people now. I'm saying that we need to penetrate the network. And again, as I said, I don't think the French defeated the network that did the Charlie Hebdo attack. So therefore, it came back stronger. It was resilient, and therefore, what we see now in the attack today. So what I'm saying is we have to use the good old-fashioned human intelligence, the old penetration of the network. And we're talking about some very dangerous stuff here. You know, CIA and DOD case officers who go about trying to risk their lives to basically recruit people to spy for us in those networks, to tell us what's going on. That's what we need to focus on, get back to the basics. I think this other stuff, I don't think for a minute Americans should give up one monicum freedom. I think we need to just go harder at the terrorists than we have before.
When you say penetrate the network, Colonel, and you mentioned, boots on the ground and how you certainly don't advise that, and we know that the president has stated that he certainly doesn't want to do that as well. But we're not just talking about penetrating ground forces and informants there. We're also talking about penetrating this cyber war. And, and all of the encryption that is happening there and deciphering what exactly is being said.
Well, that is part of the issue here. Terrorist organizations are the first to adapt new technology. We learned this in the 90s working against the drug cartels. Drug cartels were always a step ahead of us because they learned how to use something called PGP, which is pretty good encryption. They were able to basically encrypt all of their critical information. We couldn't see where they were moving drugs. Same with ISIS. They're learning very rapidly how to use cyberspace, and frankly, we've learned how to target people via cyberspace as well. They are very astute. They learn very fast. So this is where we have to have the best and the brightest working at our cyber command. I've been working with the Army War Office, something called cyber sovereignty. We're trying to look at how to get the balance right between getting the right people involved and actually fighting this as a real threat. But you're absolutely correct. And the other thing is that ISIS is very good with social media, as we talked about earlier. They know how to use social media. They know how to advertise. They know how to basically recruit. And they are unlike Al-Qaeda. They understand us. They understand the system which they're dealing with. And that's why we have to really get serious about dealing with them now before they're able to do more damage to our allies or to our own interests.
Okay, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer from the Army, we thank you so much for your insights tonight. Really appreciate it. Shed a lot of light for us as we follow the situation from Paris right now. Once again,